Well, here we are in the last session of the 2021 user group meeting, and what a meeting it has been so far. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Stephanie and I'm part of the marketing team here at Vectric. For this session, I'm here in the labs and I'll be stepping into some big shoes by hosting a session traditionally presented by the one and only Michael Tyler. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here with us today, so I'm going to be stepping in to bring you some of my tips and tricks on finishing your CNC projects, as well as some inspiration to turn your trash into treasure with some upcycling. So let's see what we've got to work with. Okay, so first of all, we have this set of nested side tables that I got from Facebook Marketplace. Facebook is a fantastic source of items no longer wanted that people are getting rid of locally. In this session, I'm going to be showing you how to transform this table into a shabby chic style table, which is really on trend at the moment. To do that, we're going to be taking the table apart, sanding down so that we can get rid of all of this dark colour off the top. We'll be adding some autumn-inspired 3D onlays to the side here to add some extra detail, and then we'll be adding some lime and wax to really accentuate the wood grain. Next up, we've got this Celtic cross, which was created by one of the team a few years ago. The clip arc that we used to create this is actually available to you if you're an Aspire user for free, so you can go and download that now. We've decided to give this a Halloween makeover, so we're going to be adding some concrete effect to this, and I'm going to be showing you how to do that with just the items I've got here, which includes some black and white paints, some baking powder, a paintbrush and a sponge. So let's get started. Okay, so we've got the table dismantled and into as many flat pieces as we can. The next step is to use a power sander to take off as much of the dark colour as we can, and then we'll be manually sanding all of the intricate details and the rounded edges that you can see here. Sanding is a really important step in restoring wood because it can remove scratches or cuts the wood may have endured over time. The sanding process evens out the wood so that minor flaws in the wood disappear and don't interfere with the wood refinishing. Okay, so while I finish sanding this table, let's take a look at the 3D design Becky's creating in the software to add some detail to this table.
Right, so thanks Steph. So going with that awesome theme, I'm thinking it'd be nice to include some oak leaves and some acorns that we could onlay onto the side of the table. So in terms of the software, I'm going to open up a vector file. I'm just going to have a look at those vectors, and then we'll look at modelling up the parts and then kind of assembling and arranging all of the parts into our composition that we want to machine. Okay, so jumping straight in, so here is our vector file. So the way I started was I actually sketched out on a piece of paper some oak leaves and acorns. I took a photo of it and then I brought that into the software, and then using the polyline tool I just traced around the oak leaf and drawing the veins, and I also traced around the acorn, drawing all of the key parts for that. So when you're working with things like this, as I mentioned in my session, kind of like make the most of what you have. So draw one and then you can just create a copy of it to create the rest of the composition. So that's what we're going to do here. So I'm going to start by modelling up the leaf. So I'm just going to rename this level and we'll call this leaf. We'll just switch the visibility on for that level, and we're going to use the 2-rail sweep. So I'm not going to go into too much as to the vectors and the shapes that I'm using. If you've never used a 2-rail sweep before or any of the modelling tools before, then I highly recommend that you take a look at my sessions for the user group, kind of a beginner's session on how to model in the software, and obviously you have lots of tutorial videos to watch, which will link you to some of those in this particular video. So we've got our 2 rails and we've got this cross section to give us kind of shape, and then we're just going to go ahead and give that a name, and we'll just call that one leaf, and then we can press apply, close out. So there's our kind of base shape. And then we're just going to take that component, hold down shift, and we're going to crop it to that vector to give us that leaf shape. Insert a new level, and we're going to rename that level and call that one veins. And we're going to create the veins using these vectors and the extrude tool. So this enables us to extrude a profile through a vector rail. And so we're going to take this rounded profile at the bottom over here, and then we're going to have a smaller profile that we're just going to have somewhere around here. So it's going to blend from one profile to the other, and then we're going to come out in a flat zero shape at the top there, and we could just call that one central, and then press apply to see how that looks. Perfect. And then we could start a new component, and then we'll just take all of the vectors that represent the other veins here, and we're going to use selection to turn them all into rails. We're going to apply the smaller of the rounded profiles to all of these, and we're also going to apply it to just past the vein where the vein intersects, and that's just to maintain that profile there past the intersection. And so we'll just pop that in like so. Okay, didn't want to do that one, so we'll right click, delete that one, pop that there, and then again we want to just flatten that out, so we'll take that flat shape and just apply that to the ends. We'll go ahead, press apply, we can see how that looks. Set the combine mode of that to merge so it blends in with the central vein, and then we'll just call that one veins, and then we'll go ahead, press apply, and then we'll close out there. So let's just take that central vein, and we just want to crop it to the leaf vector. So that vector selected, let's go ahead and crop that. And there we have it. So then we can insert a new level, and we'll rename that level, and we'll just call this one leaf. And then we'll use this option here to create a component from the visible model, and we can just undraw these levels. That way we still have access to all of the individual components that make up this leaf, but now we've got one finished leaf here. And then if we wanted to, we could look at giving that a little bit of a smooth over. So I just want to go just around the edges. That's why I'm just using the sculpting tools here as opposed to using the smooth filter. So I just want to kind of just soften the edges there and just bring that round like so, and then perhaps we'll just nudge the strength right down and just kind of go over the veins as well. Okay, happy with that, so we'll press OK, and then we'll just go ahead into our 2D view and just fit that to our screen. So now we can move on to model up the acorn. So again, let's insert a new level, right click, rename that level, and we're going to call that one acorn. And then we can start. So with that level, the active level, let's go ahead and take this vector here. So we've got this vector that represents the nut. So if we just zoom in there, we're going to go into the create shape tool. We're just going to use a basic rounded profile, no limit. And we'll just give that a name. We'll call that one nut. Go ahead, press apply just to take a look at that. So we've got a nice bulbous rounded shape there. So I'm happy with that. So we could start a new component. Then we're going to look at creating the tip. So I've got this shape that kind of overlaps into the nut component that we've already got there, and that's just going to give us a nice little hint at the tip of the acorn itself. So here we'll just go and call that one tip, set the combine mode of that to merge, and then we'll just press apply. And you can see straight away that's looking kind of like an acorn nut. All I need to do is just kind of smooth that detail in just to remove that join line there. Okay, so that's that one. I'm going to start a new component. Now for the shell. So when you're working with things like shells or something that overlaps another shape that has a hard edge, it's always a good idea to actually create a rounded shape and then using that same vector, create another vector that kind of crops it back. So we're going to create a nice bulbous shape with this one, and we're going to crop it back using this one here. So for this vector, let's just go ahead with a round profile. We're going to scale this to an exact height. Let's try around 0.162, and we'll just call this one the shell, and then we'll go ahead, press apply. Okay, so you can see that there, nice bulbous shape. Happy with that, so we could go and close out there. And then with that shell, we can actually take that, shift and select the vector. We're just going to deselect the original vector there, and then we're going to crop that back. That's going to give us that nice hard edge. Okay, that's awesome. Okay, so at this stage what we could do is we could look at just decreasing the height here. So let's just try 0.15 just to knock that back a little bit, and that's good. So let's close out. Okay, so we're just going to do a little bit of sculpting now just to make it look more acorn-like. So I'm actually going to take the tip and the nut. I'm actually going to group them together, and then I'm going to duplicate this group. The reason why I'm doing this is just so that I always have access to the individual components that we have, should I want to go back to them at a later date. But at the same time, I can go on and create permanent changes like sculpting with the new duplicate components that I create. So with that, we're just going to go a very small smooth over at the bottom here just to soften that edge, and I think that's just all we need there. So we'll go ahead and press OK. And then for the shell, we're just going to duplicate that, and I'm just going to switch that shell off. I'm just going to move that down the list so I know that these are my safe components and these are the ones that I'm going to sculpt into. And then for the shell, let's go into the sculpting tools. We'll just pop that in Z and then use the twiddle tool, and we're just going to zoom in there. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to add in just some random kind of notches just to give it a little bit of a texture that you kind of see on the actual shell of an acorn. Okay, and I'm okay with that, so we'll just do a little smooth just here like so, and then we'll go ahead and press OK, and there is our acorn. Okay, so we're just going to undraw the leaf level, and then I'm just going to create a component of the visible model, and there is our safe baked new acorn there. So we've got the acorn and we've got the leaf. So let's just set the combine mode of this level to merge so it blends in. Right then, so now we just need to model up the stalk. So we're just going to insert a new level. We're going to rename this level, call that one stalk. We'll set the combine mode of this to merge. And we're just going to use a 2-rail sweep. So we've got 2 vector rails here, 2-rail sweep. I'm going to say use selection, and we're going to sweep this cross section from here and this smaller cross section to here. And then we could just call that one stalk. And then we could go ahead and press apply and see how that looks. So we'll just close out there, and that's pretty much it. So now all we need to do is tweak with the heights of things and then tweak with the overall arrangement of our composition. So let's just create a new level. So we're going to insert a new level. We're just going to rename this level all parts. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to take a duplicate of this. So to do that, control and drag into the level. Take a duplicate of the acorn, control, drag into the level, and we'll take a duplicate of the leaf, control, drag into the level. Then we can just switch off these levels and just minimize them just so it looks nice and organized there. And then we're going to take all of our components, and we're just going to right click. I'm going to say move to layer, new layer. We'll just call this one components, and then we'll go ahead and press OK, and then we'll just undraw layer 1, and we'll just focus on the components there just so that we don't interfere with any of our vectors. And then we'll just set all of the combine modes of our models to merge so that they blend in with each other, and we can start arranging them into some kind of layout. Now I have got this sketch that I drew that was kind of basing my layout on, and so we can try and follow that to begin with. So with the leaf, let's just take a copy of that, control and move it over, and then just using the 9 key we can rotate that. I might press V just to flip that vertically so the veins are kind of the other way around, and then we can just try and just get some kind of arrangement. So I'm just rotating, moving, sizing things up into something that I like the look of. Okay, so we've got our acorn here. Actually, we'll just take this one, and again if we just rotate that a little, I might actually take this leaf and just move that up a little just so it's kind of out the way, and just move that out over here. Could make it a little bit bigger if I wanted to. Really what I'm doing now is I'm actually just looking purely at the 3D view. So for this leaf over here, I'd like to add a little bit of distortion just to alter the shape. So we're going to use the distort tool here. I'm going to apply a bounding box around that. And then what we can do is we could go on to press Bezier for this span here and Bezier for this span here. I'm just going to take all of those handles. I'm just going to move it up just to create this kind of bend effect. Okay, so something like that. And then we'll just go ahead and press close. And I'm actually just going to shrink that down ever so slightly as well. So it looks something like this. Okay, so we'll just maybe rotate it a little. And if we just zoom in, nudge that up. And then perhaps I'd like a copy over on the right hand side as well. So let's just say Control Shift and H. And then we'll take that one. And again, let's just shrink that down. And then put that over here so it looks something like that. Perhaps we want to rotate it again and move that in, something like that. And then for the acorn, again, Control Shift H to create a copy. Let's take that, we'll just move that over, and then we'll just size that down so it's a little bit smaller. And you can start to see this kind of composition is coming together, and I kind of like this layout at the moment. So we'll take the stalk as well, and we'll just Control Shift and H to create a copy there. And we'll just move that over like so. And so now, in terms of the arrangement, I'm actually quite happy with the arrangement. So we just need to alter the heights to ensure that everything is kind of where it should be. Things aren't just blending into each other or overlapping each other. So for the stalk, let's start with the stalks. Okay, so if we go to the properties, we could just look at applying a fade. So we'll go down just to fade that into the acorn. Perfect. And we'll take this one and we'll fade that one. So click. And then click again to choose the direction of the fade until you're happy with it. Okay, so like that. And then in terms of this one, you can see that we're losing a bit of the acorn, and I want this to appear as though it's in front. So we're going to tilt that from left to right, and then we'll just increase that. Okay, and we can just keep going. So it looks something like that. We could even look at fading this one down from right to left just to help us out a little bit. Okay, so that's perfect. And then in terms of their leaves, we can kind of, what we can do is just kind of nudge that over to here, and then we can take this one and we can nudge that up here as well, move that over so it looks something like that. And then with this one, let's just add in a little bit of a base height just to lift that up in front of that leaf, and I think that's looking pretty good. And so at this stage, what we can do is insert a new level, and then we'll create a copy of our visible model. So we'll just undraw that one, and then here what I'd like to do is just add a little bit of an angled draft to the overall model. So with that, we're just going to add in a draft, so it's just going to kind of bulk out the edges for us. You can go around 10 degrees, press apply, and you'll see it's just done that ever so subtle, but that's what I want to put in there. So we'll just close out. You'll see it actually creates a copy, so you can just undraw the original, and there is our draft. So now we can move on to take our model into a new file where we're going to set it up ready for toolpathing so that we can onlay them onto Steph's side table. Okay, so let's go and open an existing file. So we've got the toolpaths file ready. So I'm just going to quickly talk you through the toolpaths. So here you can see that I've imported the oak leaf arrangement. I've created copies of those and I've laid them out into this piece of material that we've got that I've measured up at 15 by 2.5 inches, and the material that the thickness that we're using is 0.79. So the side table, so each side panel measures up here at 7.5 inches wide by 2.5 inches tall, and so you can see how I've arranged them, and this is kind of like the idea of how we'd actually glue them onto the actual side table itself. So if we just switch over to the toolpaths tab, I'll just undraw that for the time being. So here we've got a 3D roughing toolpath. So I'm just using an end mill here, where we're going to use the vector as our boundary. We've got a little bit of an offset so the tool rolls past the edge of the vector there, or the model itself. And that's pretty much that. We've got a 3D finish toolpath. So here we're using a tapered ball nose, using the vector as a boundary. We've got an offset there, and we're doing that in an offset strategy. And then we've got a standard profile toolpath where we're cutting all the way through the material, using quite a small end mill where we're going to machine on the outside of those vectors. Got some tabs in there, very small thickness, just to hold those parts in place. And that's pretty much it. So in terms of the toolpath preview, let's just take a look at all of those. So we'll go for the 3D roughing. Okay, so that's what the roughing will look like. Then we've got the 3D finish toolpath to bring out all of that detail, so we'll preview that. And that looks good. We can see it's pulled out all of that detail there, and then we've just got our profile toolpath. That's going to cut all of those parts out, and we can see those tabs are handily in place there. Right then, so at this stage we'll then go on and we'll just go and save out our toolpaths. Okay, so I've saved those toolpaths, so let's head over to the labs.
Okay, so there we have it. All of the pieces of the table have been completely sanded back to remove all of that dark colour, and they've all been wiped down as well. So it's really important that you make sure you wipe over the surfaces that you've just sanded to remove any excess dust. Next up, we're going to be gluing down the decorations that Becky has kindly machined for us this morning. So we're going to put them in place, and then we'll be using a 2-part glue solution just to make sure that they glue down really quickly. So here we go. Okay, so you can see here when we have sanded, we've actually left in some of the colour that you can see in these intricate details here. We've done that on purpose to really give it a bit more of a rustic feel when we do finish it. But obviously if that's not the look that you're going for with your furniture, just continue sanding really into those creases and you'll be able to remove all of them. Okay, so there we go. We've finished reassembling the table. All of the pieces fit back together really nicely, so we've got a real nice tight fit there. We've added this 3D detail to the side, which looks really nice and really modern. Next up, we're going to be using some lime and wax to just finish it off and give it that vintage look. I'm going to be applying it with a paintbrush and some wire wool. So you'll see you only need a really tiny amount of the wax and it goes a really long way. So here goes. Okay, so there we go, it's all been lime waxed. So we're just gonna let it sit here for a while now while we go ahead and work on the Celtic cross. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier in this video, I'm gonna be giving this Celtic cross a Halloween glow up. This technique is really effective if you're making lightweight signs or props using high density foam, which generally comes really brightly coloured. I'm going to be mixing up the black and white paint I've got here to make the colour concrete that we need in a variety of shades of grey. Then I'll be adding the baking powder to give it that texture. Okay, so first of all, we're just going to scuff up the Celtic cross with some wire wool and fine sandpaper. So scraping the paint finish away or using a wood plane will actually close the pores of the wood by crushing the fibres. By sanding the wood, it actually opens the pores, helping the finish to penetrate evenly. Sanding also creates tiny invisible scratches onto the surface that enhance the bond of non-penetrating finishes. This effect is really easy to create, really effective and relatively inexpensive with very few materials required. Mix up your paints, but keep your baking powder separate. Mixing the baking powder in with your paint will start to dissolve the powder. It will make the paint thicker and fluffy, but won't give you the texture you want for something like this. For best results, use water-based paints and apply with a sponge. Here, I'm simply dipping the sponge into the paint, then into the baking powder, then I'm dabbing it across the cross. Applying it in this way adds to the texture, so try to avoid dragging the sponge around smoothly. Randomly add darker and lighter shades of grey and increase the amount of baking powder as you go to keep building the texture up. At the end, only add baking powder to your sponge and finish by randomly dabbing the powder across the top to keep some of the white powder visible on the finished piece. Well, that brings us to not only the end of this session, but also to the end of the 2021 user group meeting. I hope that I've managed to inspire you to breathe a new lease of life into some furniture items that you've got lying around, and also to get creative with your finishing techniques in future projects. Thank you so much for all of our guest speakers and to all of the Vectric presenters, and thank you so much for joining us for this event. We hope to see you next year in San Diego. Thanks for watching.
Well, thank you, Steph. What a great finale to the user group meeting to talk about, to finish off our user group meeting by talking about all the finishing techniques that you could apply to your projects. Great. And I know, obviously, behind the scenes that you and the team worked really hard to put that one together at relatively short notice. So I do understand how hard that is to do. So well done. It was really good. Now it falls to me just really to say a few words at the close of this meeting. It's been a really good 3 days. I hope you've all found it interesting. Hope you've all enjoyed and have taken something away from this meeting. I know I certainly have. I've learned loads about all sorts of aspects of the software, which is always the case when I start to really engage in the people that use the software. It's always funny to me that on the one hand, we think we make tools to do a certain job, but of course we're just making tools, and people use those tools in all sorts of remarkable ways that I never envisaged when they first were invented. So it's fantastic to do that. So I want to, on that note, I want to thank in particular some of our guest speakers. So obviously on day one, I'd really like to thank my friend Bill Young from Shopbot. As always, a great set of fascinating projects from him, with obviously that nice community spirit behind them as well. And also to Sammy, Corey and Brian from Avid CNC for both of their presentations, which were excellent. And again, with the help from these machine tool manufacturers, we're always able to cover this little extra bit of the whole process, which they're really expert in, about the tooling and material interactions, feeds and speeds and stuff like that. So thank you to all of you. And of course, thank you to the other guest speakers that we had. To Mike Legregny, showing us all of his work on those beautiful insignia signage that he does. Shane Peters, the epoxy inlays for sure. This weekend, I discovered that our local hardware store is currently having a little display about epoxies and dyes. So I am definitely popping down there tomorrow to go and get some of those and see if I can give that a go. I have in mind, maybe we'll talk about it next year. I have in mind doing something from the topographical stuff that Corey was showing, combined maybe with the epoxies, see if we can't make something with an epoxy lake that's actually geographically correct from satellite data. Something like that would be really cool, wouldn't it? Also, I'd like to thank obviously Mark Lindsay for showing us around his workshop, and in particular the shop clock that he's made, the two-sided shop clock. Brilliant project, thank you for that. And Andy Johnson, who did the other form of inlays, which I also think is a fantastic technique, and hopefully you can see there that the potential for that to produce the highest quality results is really amazing. And of course, it's a sort of technique that you can only ever really do with a CNC machine. So it kind of opens up to all of us the possibility of something which the machine just enables us to do, which we couldn't do by hand. And that's always a nice project, I think. And then over to the Vectric team itself. Obviously, Becky and Todd, thank you both. You're the acknowledged experts in this area these days, but even so, I appreciate how hard it is to put these highly professional videos together. So thank you both for that. David and Nav from the support team at Vectric. So this is obviously not their day job. So hopefully you appreciate that they were bringing to the table their experience instead from dealing day to day with all of the questions and queries that we get from you, our customers. And hopefully that also gives them some insight into the sort of problems that beginners have in particular. I know that David's presentation as well was also backed by the whole of the support team, Chris and the others in the support team, who helped to hone that and put the ideas together that formed the basis of his demo. So thank you to all of the technical support team. That was great. And also to Adam and Mike from the development team. So it's a bit of an unusual departure for us this year. We tried to include everybody from all the parts of the company. And so what you had there from the dev team was, interestingly enough, Adam, one of the most experienced developers and the technical director of the company, combined with Mike, one of the newer developers who's only just joined to produce their set of efficiency tips and tricks, which they really know about from the nuts and bolts side of putting together those tools and the maths that underpins them. So hopefully that was useful. But of course, we are just representatives of Vectric as a whole. And amazingly, and when I tell people this, mostly people are really amazed to discover that there's just 30 people in Vectric. And so it's a wonderful team of people. It's my privilege to lead. And behind us, public faces that you've seen over the last 3 days. I want to particularly, mention everyone else really, the mathematicians and software developers who create these remarkable tools that we're able to show off to you, but also the kind of unsung heroes, I guess, in any company like ours, which is the administrators and the sales and support team who make it possible for us to provide these tools to you wherever you are in the world, and to also ensure that you are successful in getting the most from them. So those people are also really, really valuable, and we're really grateful to the work that they do, even though it's not often seen publicly. Okay, but thank you to them. And then finally, I want to thank all of you, our fellow Vectricians. Well, it's what a wonderful community of like-minded doers you all are. And that goes from the highly skilled professional CNCers, from industrial CAD cammers to the kind of eccentric experimenters with their homebrew Franken CNC machines in their lofts and garages. I love all of it. It's all fascinating and it's all amazing. And it has been a privilege for me to be able to participate indirectly in all of these amazing businesses and these fascinating projects that you all produce every year. It's been, I guess, maybe 25 years since I was first started working in this area and was introduced to the CAD/CAM world by my colleague and friend Brian Moran, who also founded Vectric. But it is also it's true to say that 25 years later, I still love this job as much as I did at the beginning, and that is thanks to all of the amazing things that I get to get involved with, thanks to you. So, thank you, all our fellow Vectricians. I do hope that you're all going to stay safe. We're all going to be experiencing a much, much better year ahead, and that Vectric's events calendar, public-facing events calendar, will be back on track for 2022, and I do hope to meet as many of you in person as possible at the various events, shows and exhibitions that we get involved in around the world, in the US and in mainland Europe. So hopefully I'll see as many of you as possible in person over the next few months. But bye for now.